Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth, and thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's episode and also tuning in to help support the podcast. As every week I'm sharing a new episode, just sharing words, thoughts of hopes, inspiration, and motivation to hopefully bring value into your world again. So thank you so much again for being here. And what I wanted to talk to you about today is this: let go and let God. And for me, what this is about and what this means is to try to let go of the control that we often have in our life. We are constantly always trying to control everything that we are doing, every decision that we're making, every path that we are trying to go. And I think a lot of times it's different than where God is wanting us to go, where we're supposed to go. And for me, this is one of these things that the more I begin to let go of certain control in my life, the more clear certain paths become, right? And what I'm trying to get at with all of this is, for me, I start to follow a lot more of not what I feel I want to do, but what I feel, not what I feel I want to do, but what I feel God wants me to do, right? I lean into more of where I feel I'm being pulled to. And so for me, that's this whole idea of like letting go and letting God, is for me to stop trying to fight certain things as to what I actually want in certain areas, but more of what I feel I'm being drawn towards, if that makes sense. For me, I really I lean on God a lot for a lot of things in my life. I go to Him for guidance to really navigate where I'm supposed to be going to, what I'm supposed to be doing, what decisions are the right decisions and so forth. And I think when I lean into that, it really helps me, navigate towards a path of where I believe I'm being called to and what direction I feel I'm being pulled down. And so, like I said, for me, the more I do this, the more I feel I'm getting placed into where I'm supposed to be, even if it's not maybe where I necessarily want to or think I'm supposed to, but I feel it's where God wants me to. And that's always going to be the place where I'm meant to be. And just over time, the more I do this, the less stress I do feel in turn sometimes, because I feel it's, I'm not trying to decide things for me more so, but like, what am I feeling like if my, deep down in my heart, I'm supposed to be doing? What things, feel like they're the least path of resistance that are pulling me in a certain direction? And, when I lean into all of that, I know I'm being guided to where I'm supposed to be. And so it's just really personally helped me out a lot. And that's this whole thing behind like letting go and just letting God. And sometimes we're trying to control too much in our life. Sometimes we're trying to fight so much, going down a certain path, making certain decisions. And there's so much resistance there because we're being stubborn. And we're like, but I want to do this thing and I want to make this decision. I want to go down this path, etc., etc. And it's opposite of where we're supposed to be going. And that's why we are feeling resistance. That's why we're feeling this kind of like, I'm trying to like open this door, but it's not opening. Why? And I think that's because we're fighting something that we're not supposed to be doing, a path that we're not supposed to be going down. And that's part of the examples that I have from my own cases. Sometimes I feel I'm trying to open up doors and they're not opening, instead of trying to fight it with every ounce of energy. I'm like, let me open up this door. I wanted this door and I want it now, etc., etc. I realized that, hey, God's got me not going here for a reason. Sometimes we don't think, sometimes we often maybe think that the doors that are closing on us is because maybe you don't feel God wants you to have certain things, but we don't realize that it's a blessing in disguise. And sometimes there's certain paths that, are being shut down for us, not to harm us, but to help us, to keep us from something that could be potentially bad. And so that's how I've navigated a lot of this too in my life is, realizing that I'm in certain paths on a certain direction for a certain reason. And, a lot of it's because there's a purpose, there's a meaning, there's something bigger behind, this path that I'm going. It's much better than another path that I'm trying to go down. And so I just try to relinquish a lot of that control, certain areas, I try to make certain decisions that are taking me down certain paths, or I'm pivoting, going in a different direction than I thought I would be going. I just try to fight it less and less now, I try to listen to what my heart is telling me and to where I feel I'm naturally being pulled towards, and realize this is where God wants me to go. God wants me to do something down this way. And, a lot of times you don't see it firsthand. There's a lot of decisions, a lot of paths God has taken me down, especially a lot lately in life, that weren't on my bingo card, that I had no idea how I got here because I thought I was going in that direction. But, as I start to see certain things unfold, I realize there's a bigger picture to it. I realize there's more to it than I thought, or it's somehow connected to a bigger purpose of things that God has me, living for. And so again, it's something for me that the more I'm able to let go of that control, the more I stop trying to live for me and live for God, in a sense of just being like, instead of me trying to make this decision for me, like, what do you want me to do, right? I spend a lot of time talking to God, asking God about all of these different things. The more it helps me go, I think, flow naturally to where I go, in the path that I'm going down. And it just, for me, really lets off a lot of pressure too. Because instead of trying to fight everything that's I might want, or a path I want to go down, but it's not necessarily the one that's easy to go down, not the one that's that I can't open the door of again. I'd be like, there's some reason that God's keeping me from this path right now. Maybe it's something I'm going to return to later. Maybe it's something that could be harmful, whatever. But let me go down to where God is pulling me to. And there's so much of that's taking place in my life to where that I'm just like, okay, I'm going to stop listening to me and I'm going to listen to God, because I know God has it figured out for me. I know God has got his plan and how it's going to happen. And I think what he wants from me especially is to have faith and trust and believe that he's got it all worked out, and it's not up to me to decide how it's going to work out or what's going to work out, but just to believe in him and just to have faith that it is going to work out. And so that's why me leaving that control into him and not myself is having that faith. Instead of trying to fight everything that there's resistance on in my life and a decision I'm making or a path that I'm going down, I just lean into, there's a reason that that's not happening right now or won't ever happen. There's a reason God's pulling me down this way. There's a reason I'm being filled to, or have a feeling that I'm being drawn towards this thing. And instead of trying to fight the resistance, I lean into where this, this deeper voice inside me says, hey, we're supposed to be going down here. Just, something tells me that I'm supposed to be going down this direction. But that all just has come with time for me too, right? The more I realize I let go of that control and I just kind of lean into having trust with God and be like, what do you want me to do? Or sometimes I just hear this voice that feels almost like a parent figure, like a father figure, kind of directing me. And it's usually like a secondary voice. A lot of times I have these voices, it's like my first ones are the first ones to be like, I want this, or I want to go down this path. But then sometimes over here, like a deeper calming voice within me, again, almost parent-like, that it's like, yeah, this is what you want, but this is kind of where you need to be. Yeah, you might want to go down this path, but this one's going to be a better one. And it's that secondary voice that I try to listen to, because I always feel that that's God guiding me to where I'm supposed to be, not necessarily where I want to be, where I thought or expect to be, but where I'm meant to be, And so I'm telling you, for me personally, the more I've been able to let go of that control and stop fighting things that aren't supposed to happen, it really seems like I'm on a much better path. And I believe when I listen to that secondary voice too, that it's going to put me on a better path altogether, because not everything that I want for me is going to be the best thing for me, right? I believe we all live different lives. We all live different versions of ourselves. But I always believe one thing is true, that there's one version that exists within us all that is the best version that you need for yourself and that this world needs. And so I feel when I'm listening to that secondary voice, that's the version of the path that I'm going down. It may not be exactly what, I think it's going to be or whatever it is, but I always believe that path is going to be the best version of myself and is going to lead me in the best path, in the best direction with the best kind of outcomes. And so, but that all starts with, again, me letting go a lot of control in my life and just saying, hey, God, this is in your hands, direct me, guide me, navigate me. I tried it in life without you. I accepted that. I surrendered. Here I am asking you now to help me figure out what the path is. So even if I don't understand, even if it's not clear, like help me, not fight that resistance of things and paths and doors that I'm trying to open where I don't belong. But, help me just lean more into those things that, I feel I'm being pulled towards, because I understand that's him trying to help guide me to where I'm supposed to be. And there's always a bigger, picture for why that's happening. That's more meant for my purpose and calling and reasoning for living, more so than another door I might want to go down or another pathway. So, hopefully if you take anything from this, episode, it's just that, is to give up a little bit more control on things that are happening in your life, in the sense of just follow like what you feel you're being drawn to, follow what you feel in your heart you're supposed to be doing, versus always trying to fight for control. And even though this thing is not happening, I need it to happen, and we're constantly battling the resistance of life, and we realize and we take it as a sign of sometimes like, well, if it's not happening, I just need to work harder at it, versus sometimes just being like, there's a reason that God's not opening up this door. There could be something on the other side of this door that we don't see, but it could be detrimental to us. It could harm us, and we're not ready for whatever it is. And I think if we can lean into, just following in a direction where we're being called to, things that we're being meant to do, even if we don't understand it, that we're generally going to end up where we're supposed to be in life. So, again, let go and let God. Thank you once again for being here. And as always, I will see you on the next one.